everybody. Welcome to the Wacky Wonderful Show. I am Joe.
I am Wyatt.
Hi.
Good way to open us up.
Hi.
Hi.
Look, we're getting into Star Wars this week, and boy, oh boy, is Star Wars vast.
There's a lot of stuff.
It's a galaxy full of stuff. It's a whole galaxy full of stuff. And you know, I tend to focus on more of the filmmaking side of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's easy.
Yeah.
You got your work cut out for you, sir.
I do.
Now, you tackle the storytelling and character breakdowns of... I mean, pick your poison. Who you going with?
Honestly, I think the most extensive character development arc that we've seen across, like, all the shows is probably Ahsoka.
You think greater than the Skywalker family, or even just one of them, like Luke or Anakin?
It's definitely more than one of them.
So you think Ahsoka has the greatest character developed? She's the greatest developed character in all of Star Wars.
I mean, she went from being a brat, essentially, in the first couple seasons of the Clone Wars, like the most hated Star Wars character,
really,
to having she had a moment in one of the episodes where they decided, you know, we've got to make her learn stuff. We got to make her an interesting, compelling character. So she became more humble. She started thinking more, and people watched she became a better character, and her interactions with Anakin and Obi-Wan. So she is connected to the Skywalker story.
Yeah.
You know, and we even see that still she's connected to the Skywalker story in the most recent episode of Boba Fett.
She is. She's hanging out with Luke.
Yeah. So she's gone from Clone Wars to Rebels. She might show up in the Bad Batch. I don't know.
When does the Bad Batch take place?
The Bad Batch takes place right after Order 66.
Oh.
Like right after Order 66.
Dang.
I mean, the Bad Batch were introduced in Season 7, which was a short season for the clones to kind of end the Clone Wars and jump Ahsoka's story moving forward. So they were introduced there, and then the latter half of the season focuses on Ahsoka and her experience through Order 66.
I see.
And it's tough. It's hard to watch, you know, because the clones are, you know, characters that she's been like Rex is a clone who she's been fighting alongside for years at this point. And so we get to see that, and that's really fun. But then, you know, there's Rebels, and now she's in the live action stuff. So, I mean, she's moved from, like, you know, the beginning to now.
So she has been a consistent character that her story hasn't stopped. And in fact, in some ways, it could just be beginning.
I mean, she was even referenced in the last sequel movie. What was that called?
The
Rise of Skywalker?
No. Maybe.
Yeah.
The Rise of Skywalker. Yeah.
Because, you know, when Rey is, like, doing her anime moment where she's, like, having to get up off the ground, she hears all the voices of the previous Jedi.
And Ahsoka was there?
Ahsoka's in there.
Heck yeah.
So it's really cool to see her character.
At least they did that right.
Right. And then, of course, you know, Obi-Wan.
We
want to see, you know, Obi-Wan as well. Went from, you know, the prequels, Clone Wars, and into the original trilogy that we know of.
You know, looking at how many weeks we're going to do this, they might have a new show out before we're done.
They might.
They might.
I've been waiting.
They might drop Kenobi any day now.
I mean, they've already been dropping art, posters and stuff, and I'm like, okay,
any day now.
All right.
You know, it's coming soon when they start dropping art.
Yeah.
Especially.
But you know, you're looking. You know, I I'm taking on the brunt of the work.
You are,
With,
and the
with
thing
the
is,
story.
the thing is, are you scared? Is my question.
It's scary, yes. And I think that's why I'm probably opening up this week with something that's a little bit more
heavy.
No, it's. Do you think it's heavy? You think it's heavy stuff?
I think it's all good information, but it's a lot. It's a mouthful.
Okay, it's a lot of information, but I think it's information that
is helpful.
Number one, we're not even touching on like how much stuff there is. I tried, y'all. I tried. I was looking for obscure characters that, might play into the future of what Star Wars is now and the shows that we're going to see in the future. And I was just like, there's so many of them.
There's so many.
I was like, yo, what was that girl in the Clone Wars that Obi-Wan was romantically involved with? And then I looked her up. I'm like, she dead. But she was, her name was Satine Kryze.
Satine Kryze?
Yeah, she's the descendant of Tar Kryze on Mandalore.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, sick.
Like the bloodline, the royal bloodline, and probably related to the Mandalorian that Din Djarin, the Mandalorian, fights for the Darksaber in one of the more recent episodes, because his last name is Kryze as well.
Yes, which it was a cool little twist.
Yeah,
it was a cool twist to see. I wonder, does Dave Filoni, is he just like, I have in my home, I have 3 rooms. That's a total of maybe dedicate 9 walls in his house to timelines. And
characters.
Character trees.
Yeah.
And just to try to keep everything safe. And that 3rd room is everything that hasn't happened that we don't even know yet.
Yeah.
And Dave Filoni's like, when I have to pitch something, I just, handhold a Disney executive, walk them into my house and be like, you see this room? Mm-hmm. These are my plans. Do you have a better one? And they're like, no, make us money.
And then in a 4th room. An empty room with 1 window and a little round table sits George Lucas. And he's like, well, Dave, here's some ideas.
Here's some ideas.
Star Wars.
Well, the thing is, Dave usually has everything straight, but he'll run something by George, and George will be like, Dave, I think you're forgetting about this one thing.
Yeah.
And then Dave's like, you're right, George.
George, I know all of this is in your head, and I can't actually physically reference it.
But do you approve the wall? And he's like,
yeah. No, yeah. That's actually canon. Dave does go to George when he's thinking of stuff. I'll mention in my video, there's the mention in the past of the ones involving the Force, and Dave and George were talking together about how they introduced that into Star Wars. But then, of course, there was a fun story where Dave said, when he started working on Star Wars, George invited him to his home and was like, legit asked him, what do you think it means to be a Jedi?
What is cowboy hat?
I don't know if he was wearing the cowboy hat. And I'm not. That's a funny thing to say.
It's a funny thing,
but
it's a legit thing to say.
But it also shows that this is how much George cares about this stuff.
Yeah,
and that he was hoping he would find somebody who would care about it as well. Mm-hmm. And Dave very clearly cares about it.
Oh, yeah. And just some dude from Pennsylvania was a fan as a kid.
Yeah.
And then he's like, this is me now.
He just came
I'm
off
the future of Star Wars.
Came off of working on The Last Airbender TV show. And he's like, all right, what next?
What next? I got an idea.
It. Star Wars.
Netflix is like, can you make Airbender? He's like, no.
I'm out.
Disney's paying me big bucks to do my own story.
But what I was saying, all of that to say, I'm looking at the characters and stuff, but you're looking at the filmmaking.
Yes, and to get started before you go into all that, I have a pretty cool thing. It's coming up. It's a big revelation in the Star Wars universe.
Mhm.
Where I look at filmmaking. What questions do you have before we get started?
I mean, we absolutely said that I have a lot of work, but I think you have a ton of work
I don't really have a ton of work. I just have to be selective.
Because there's filming techniques
Mhm.
used in different filming techniques used in all 3 original movies. Different directors.
Yep.
They had different ways of stylizing things. And then you have the prequels.
Yep.
Completely different techniques
Yep.
and new stuff and lighting and CG and stuff. And now you have the modern stuff.
Absolutely.
All different.
All different. But the thing is, the cool thing about filmmaking is the way things change. Now, cameras change, right? But really, when it comes down to it, it's the only thing that really changes is the world and the amount of people you need surrounding a camera.
Right.
That's all that changes.
But I mean, the lighting in the original movies is going to look completely different to the lighting in what we're seeing now.
Exactly. So I love the current way they are making the films, but the older films they're using like RE lights. They're using these big lights. They don't older films, but especially for Star Wars because it's a space themed, everything's very harsh. I mean, that light smacks the actors in the face, you know? And it's like a clean break, you know what I mean? It's like light, shadow.
Yeah.
And it's because it's the old way of filming. It has to do some with the way the film sees the light being projected off of the characters and in the image, and mixed with the style of the times and the limitations to technology. I am actually going to do an episode where maybe next week, because I have more time on my own, just to be by myself and come up with everything. I'm actually going to make a video that's focused on the evolution of technology for Star Wars universe.
Okay.
So
I think you should keep in mind even there's cartoon stuff.
Oh, I'm going to keep in mind.
Like, you know, the thought, there it is, got it. There's a final fight between Darth Maul and Ahsoka. And it's like mocap.
Okay.
So they got the original guy who played Darth Maul.
Yeah.
And he's doing all like the moves and everything. And an actress playing, you know, the role of Ahsoka. And they are actually physically doing all the moves and fighting each other. And it's in the show.
Sick.
And you can tell.
Because it's heavier movements.
You can tell when you look at Darth Maul in the past, in the show, versus this scene, you're like, oh, that's his movements. That's him, you know?
Yeah. Let's pick up this conversation at the end of the episode, though.
Yeah.
Let's jump into it. It's going to be a
because
longer
otherwise
episode.
we're going to keep talking about Star Wars.
And that's why we're dedicating 6 weeks to
6
it.
weeks.
There's a lot of things that have to be said, and we're going to, you know, walk up to the wall at Dave Filoni's home. We're going to scratch the surface a little bit and then bounce.
Yeah.
And that scratching is going to take about 6 weeks. So let's get into the first two. I'm going to start with reaction, breakdown of composition for a pretty cool new scene from the Book of Boba Fett. And you're jumping in with...
extended canon, essentially.
Extended canon.
And how
kind of like what to expect from the next generation of Star Wars.
Yeah, what to expect in the new generation from some of the older stuff.
Yeah. Evidence. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, welcome back to the video. So glad you're here to join me on a quest of understanding filmmaking a little bit. So what I do is I usually take scenes from movies, from shows that are popular, that everyone loves, and I like to look at them and analyze them from a filmmaker's perspective. So we're looking at things like lighting, color difference, composition, all of the above. And so today, starting week 1 of probably a few weeks of reacting to Star Wars content. And recently, something huge happened in the Star Wars universe from the Book of Boba Fett. They introduced the character Cad Bane to the live-action series. He's popular from Clone Wars, and I'm sure other ones. Was he also in Rebels? The Bad Batch. Okay, not Rebels. So he's a pretty well-known character for Star Wars geeks out there. I personally have never gotten into the animated series a whole lot, so this is a kind of a new character for me. But I've only really watched the episode with him introduce the scene like once all the way through. And so because of YouTube restrictions, a lot of people are putting up little shorts, little clips. And so I've taken one of those. I think someone added some music to it, but I want to look at the visuals of kind of a condensed highlight of this scene and just kind of react to the way it was structured, the way it was formatted, and the artistic composition. And if anyone was wondering if, Boba Fett, the Mandalorian, was not a cowboy style show, well, this scene pretty much establishes itself as like, no, this is Star Wars Cowboys. So let's go ahead and watch it and analyze some stuff.
Do me a favor and tell these people to head inside for a spell.
What's going on, boss?
Let me handle this, deputy.
Super cool. I love that. First, I gotta just acknowledge the brilliance when it comes to filling the frame. So, like, all through here, it's just all wilderness, but even the composition. So, the screen is literally split in half. From the sand to the sky, you have the nice leading lines, not only from the horizon, but also a little bit of extra motivation from these hills that kind of focuses you in on the center of the frame. And then also framing up the scene in such a way to bring your attention to the center. And that's with these kind of identical, moisture seekers or moisture trappers or whatever they are that's out there. So this is just a beautifully simple framed shot that just brings all of your attention to this stranger in the desert. And this is like classic cowboy sky shot with the face off. It's wonderful. I love it. Shows the whole environment. You know what you'd see in cowboy films, the saloon next to him. Just some stranger coming out of the desert into the small town. It's wonderful.
Cad Bane. Whatever Fett is paying you, match. And all you got to do is stay put and let things play out.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Sick.
I'd be careful where I was sticking my nose if I were you.
I just want to point out real quick, I've done some videos on Dune recently, but I love desert films because you just have so much opportunity to do this exposure difference. So like with filmmaking, you want to make sure your background and your foreground is different exposures. You don't want it even. And since in the desert, almost everything around you is going to be bright, a lot of filmmakers go for the darker characters look. So like all through here, everything is white. Everything except for the character. He is a few stops darker than the rest of the background.
Is that friendly advice or a threat?
Boba Fett is a cold-blooded killer who worked for the Empire. You should have never given up your...
I love the variety of, medium shots to close-ups to choker shots. It just kind of builds the tension, and it does feel like a natural cowboy film with the face-off. It feels like what you've seen in old cowboy films, which I actually have a comparison after this to The Good, the Bad, the Ugly with Clint Eastwood that we'll get to in just a few moments. But look at how, have you noticed, you can see how every single shot is very stagnant. It's you build emotion by either getting closer or getting wider shots like this, and you build, it's a constant back and forth, and it's depending on like who's kind of in control of the scene, who's in control of the conversation, or in this case, the showdown. Wonderful.
As long as the spice keeps running, everyone will be left alone.
And oh, sick! Look, his coat's just blown in the wind. I think it's so wonderful, and the variety of shots, like even with before he arrives, when he's still on his way, just to kind of see these long sweeping shots of the vast empty desert. I mean, if this doesn't scream cowboy, this is like to the fundamentals what a cowboy film showdown looks like. I mean, it's literally designed and set up and then edited together to match many of the old westerns that we've seen. With the variety of shots, what I was saying about who controls the conversation, usually the one who is getting the point across the stronger can be a close-up or a choker shot. This right here is a choker shot because it's cutting off part of the head and framing up close to the chin. And we see that kind of from as contrasting here. So that's just a close-up because he has headroom and it's showing a bit of the shoulders. And even in a moment like this, where it kind of cuts to this medium shot of Cobb, it goes from that extreme close-up, that choker shot of Cad.
If I were you,
Is that friendly advice or a threat?
Boba,
And you notice it goes from a choker to a medium, and then it splits the difference because it's like he's not he didn't quite get his point across, and so you kind of see like it loses control a little bit by it framing out to a close-up. This is a nice close-up of Cad here, and once again you have a little bit of headroom up at the top and it shows the shoulders. So it's a wonderful way to contrast and choose a variety of shots when framing up any scene, but especially a scene like this. I think it's beautiful. And then the colors popping, you notice actually there's color difference between these characters. Here we see he's wearing a red shirt, he has a red bandana, but they're up against the same background. And then you contrast that with Cad Bane, who's got the blue skin. Well, color-wise, it's pleasing. A lot of graphic designers and artists that do color combinations all day long, they see a scene like this and it sticks in their mind because it's not random. It's very well thought through as to how the colors were going to work together and contrast each other. Like his eyes, the outside of the eyes match very similar to his bandana there. It's super creative. I think it works perfectly. And then I want to go ahead and flip over to show you something how I heard someone reference it, but I haven't seen anyone do it. I'm sure it already has been done. But I saw someone reference how they kind of set up Bane to be kind of like a contrast for Clint Eastwood. And that means like Clint Eastwood in the sense of, in some of his showdown films, some of his old cowboy stuff, like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And I went and watched a scene from that film, and they framed it up very similarly. Like it's obviously paying tribute or paying homage to what the Clint Eastwood films of old did. And so like, if you check out some of the framing from even just this, you have a nice medium shot. And even with the hat and the gun and just the style of everything, it's very similar. They taking hard cues on how to frame up their shots, how the frame's going to look, and then you compare it to another. You get the close-up, where you have close-up of Clint and close-up of Bane there. And then you go to the same shot, this over the shoulder from the opposition with Clint or Bane off in the distance. And then you get that choker close-up shot with the top of the head with it kind of cut at the brim. And then a little bit of neck chin room, not so much with Clint there. But these choker shots, and then you have the wonderful close-up of the gun. It's framed up a little differently, but it's fascinating to me how these filmmakers take cues from other films to motivate and to leave little Easter eggs for people that really pay attention. I know when I saw this, it did remind me of a few scenes, but from what I've seen online, it kind of seems like this might very, very easily be the inspiration for setting up this scene. I mean, it's just done so wonderfully. It doesn't pace the same. From The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, that scene drags on a lot longer, something you wouldn't see as much in a modern day film. But as far as composition goes, as far as the choice of when to cut and where to cut and what to cut to, very similar if you watch it. It's not perfect, but it's fascinating, the similarities between these. I even want to point out here, or even here, you have, if you take a quick look at the horizon, again, it's splitting the frame in half. And almost down here in Clint Eastwood's shot, the earth, the ground, is also splitting the frame in half with, these hills, these rolling hills behind him. And you see tiny little rolling hills behind Bane as well. And then even with the little moisture trapper over the shoulder of Bane there, it kind of reminds you of some of these vertical standing grave poles in the scene with Clint Eastwood from The Good, the Bad. So it's super interesting. I think it's fun to understand and even learn framing and composition. So not just from old films, not just from new films, but even taking them together and saying, what have we seen from years ago and what are we still seeing in practice today, and people taking inspiration from or even paying homage to. So that's my take on it. If there's something else interesting from this scene introducing Cad Bane to the live action Star Wars universe, or you heard someone else do an interesting breakdown, I would love to hear it. I'd love to watch it. Leave in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were, and if you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing and liking the video. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Hey there, welcome back to the video. Thank you guys for clicking. Today we're going to be looking at a little bit of Star Wars content. This is the first week in our 5-6 week series that we're going to be doing here on the channel, and we're just going to be looking into some of the stories and story concepts that Star Wars has given us in the past, that they're giving us right now, and that we might see in the future. I like to look at storytelling elements, what we can gather from a story, and what might help us be able to tell better stories. And so this week we're just going to look at some of the things that are in Star Wars, in the canon, some of the stuff from the past that we've already seen, and how that is going to affect what we are seeing now in Boba Fett and the Mandalorian. We're going to be looking at what are the things that you guys might not be familiar with. If you haven't watched the cartoon series, the animated series, Rebels, The Bad Batch, these things have a lot of elements and they're Star Wars canon, so they're definitely going to play into what we're seeing now. And we've already seen this in the past. We've had Ahsoka, and we've had now more recently Cad Bane, and some of the other characters from the animated series transition into the live action stuff, and we're definitely going to see a bunch more of it in Obi-Wan and the Ahsoka show and all the other live action shows. So we're just going to briefly look through some of the characters, some of the maybe story arc concepts, and a little bit about the nature of the Force and how these things might be able to play into the new shows. So let's just start off by looking at number one, the cast of characters from Star Wars Rebels. Now we know that Kanan, who is the guy with the dark brown hair and the cloudy eyes, he's dead. Unless we're seeing a Force ghost or hearing his voice, we might not see him. And he's played by Freddie Prinze Jr. He might come back in at some point. And then, of course, we have Ezra Bridger, who is the main character of the show. At the end of the show, he transported off into hyperspace, and that's kind of how the show ends. Nobody really knows where he went. But Ahsoka and the lady here in this picture, Hera Syndulla, at the end of the show say that they're going to go look for him. So we might see Hera. We've already seen her ship in Rogue One. If you're looking in one of the battles in space, you can actually see her ship flying through. You can hear mention of her name over the loudspeaker at the Rebel base. It would be really cool to see her on screen if she's still alive in the canon. Jeb and Chopper, the robot, there's potential for them to make a brief appearance in a show. But seeing as how we're kind of going on a Mandalorian kick, Sabine Wren is an important figure in the Mandalorian story in Rebels. And so it would track that she would be important in the Mandalorian or in Boba Fett. And we'll see how she plays into the story, if she plays into the story. Because she's one of the ones who found the dark saber and was responsible for giving it to Bo-Katan. Here I have a picture of Hera. I think probably more than likely she's going to be a significant character in Ahsoka if they bring her into the live action. She, for me, seems like one of the most likely characters to bring into the live action. I think the way that Rebels ended really lends itself well to have a solid relationship between Hera and Ahsoka, whether that be from their looking for Ezra or how they interacted when the rebellion was being formed and things. Next, I think one of the big shows moving forward, and the only show that's currently in animated form that we're expecting new seasons of, is The Bad Batch. And if you're not familiar with The Bad Batch, it's about a group of clones that were grown, but they had defects or differences from the rest of the clones. And so they sort of became a group of specialist clones to go into an area and use their skills to make change. And so we don't know a lot about what could happen with these characters. We've seen Fennec Shand, who is in Boba Fett. We've seen her in Bad Batch show, and we've seen Cad Bane in the Bad Batch show. So both of those characters have already interacted. We might see another interaction from them, seeing as how Cad Bane is now in the Boba Fett show. But these characters still have story moving forward in the second or third, however many seasons that there are going to be of this show. So we don't know ultimately where they're going to end up, but there's absolutely a possibility that we could see any number of these characters in the new shows. Next, I think one of the biggest characters, one of the most important characters that we're going to have in the show moving forward as a villain, since we don't have Darth Vader, and since we don't have some of those other, Emperor Palpatine, these big villain type characters, the one in Star Wars Rebels was Admiral Thrawn. Admiral Thrawn's a character who was created back in the early 90s and has been around for a while, but was only just recently in the Rebels show put on screen. And he's a very ominous, very skilled, dangerous character who at the end of Rebels, he's trapped on his ship with Ezra Bridger. And, Ezra sort of uses the Force and sends them both into hyperspace. And again, we have no idea what happened to either of them. But we know that Thrawn isn't dead because he's been mentioned in the Mandalorian show that he has returned. He's coming back into power. So that might also hint that Ezra's not dead as well. But that's just speculation. And Thrawn, I think, will definitely be a big character in either the Mandalorian moving forward or the new Ahsoka show, because Ahsoka and Thrawn are sort of at odds. Next, and kind of as an afterthought, the Boba Fett and the Mandalorian shows have really showed that we can see a lot of different characters from the past. What would be really cool, at least, I think it would be cool, is to see more of the bounty hunter cast. There's a lot of bounty hunters in Star Wars, the Clone Wars, but also there's the bounty hunters that we saw in Empire Strikes Back. There's that whole cool cast of characters that we saw when Darth Vader was given the order to find Han Solo. He tells Boba Fett no disintegrations, and Boba Fett says, "As you wish," and not in the romantic way, but in the, cool, dope. I'm down with that idea. But we have, this gentleman over here on the left. I'm sure he has a name in the Star Wars canon. If you know it, leave me a comment. We have I want to say it's like the T88 Assassin Droid, but I'm not 100% sure. We actually saw this one in The Mandalorian, and that was really cool. Boba Fett, of course, Bosk, the Trandoshan, and another droid here with a gun. Bosk would, I think, be really cool to see because he shows up in a lot of the earlier shows as well. Just a really cool bounty hunter character that would be, I think, would make a good character in the new stuff. Getting into a little bit of like the story concepts. First of all, I think in the new Ahsoka show, they're going to need to wrap up the what happened to Ezra and Thrawn. In this photo, we have Ezra using the Force. Thrawn's wrapped up in a tentacle from a space whale. I don't remember what they were called. I looked it up, but I'm going to be honest, I forgot. But the space whales can travel through hyperspace. And so it carries Ezra and Thrawn and the ship into hyperspace. I think it would be remiss of the creators not to wrap up this storyline, show us what happened to these characters, especially since the last thing we saw on the show was Ahsoka and Hera saying that they wanted to go find Ezra and bring him home. So next, we know that the Boba Fett Cad Bane meetup is going to happen. And this is something that was supposed to happen in later seasons of Star Wars The Clone Wars before it got canceled. There was a whole like bounty hunter arc set up with Boba Fett and with Bosk and with Cad Bane, and they were all supposed to be doing bounty hunter stuff, which is cool. What we do have, since that never got made, there was a half-finished scene that they aired where Boba Fett as a young boy, or not like a teenager at this point, where Boba Fett and Cad Bane are at odds. So we had a very similar showdown between Cad Bane and Boba Fett, where they have that quick draw moment. We saw a similar moment in the Book of Boba Fett between Cad Bane and Cobb Vanth, and we saw who came out on top. In the half-finished scene, you can go look it up on YouTube, Cad Bane and Boba Fett shoot each other. They both get hit at the same time. They're the same speed. They're both, super fast bounty hunter guys. It's a really fun scene, even though it looks like Play-Doh, essentially, and none of their mouths move. But the last thing that you see in the scene is Boba Fett's helmet, and it's got like a fiery dent where that dent is in his helmet. So it would have been really cool to establish that canon, that it was Cad Bane who made the mark in Boba Fett's helmet. And they might make reference to that. They might mention it. Or they might not. Who knows? But knowing Dave Filoni, a good possibility that they'll mention an interaction like that happening between them in the past. So for the Obi-Wan show, we haven't really touched on the things that we could see in that. But definitely one of the things from the prequel movies that was mentioned was Obi-Wan's search to communicate with Qui-Gon Jinn. And I think it would be really cool to see Obi-Wan, maybe traveling the Outer Rim, since at this point he's trying to avoid the Empire, traveling the Outer Rim after he dropped off Luke and searching for a connection to the Force to be able to communicate with Qui-Gon. And, they could maybe even get Liam Neeson back. They got Ewan McGregor. We might see Liam Neeson back as well. And then finally, in the story concepts, one last thing that should be mentioned. I haven't been diving too much into the book series of established canon, but in the Thrawn books, I don't know if there's one or multiple, Admiral Thrawn makes mention to knowing of a species called the Krisk or the Krysk, which is like a barbarian species from another galaxy that's been watching our Star Wars galaxy where everything's taking place, and they're like a barbaric people. And apparently the only one who knows about them is Thrawn. So that's something that could make its way into Ahsoka, perhaps, or in any other of the Star Wars shows that are going to be coming out in the future. Krisk or Krysk, or, however it's pronounced, are, I guess, sort of a canon replacement for the Yuuzhan Vong. I think that's right, or the Yuuzhan Vong was a species in the canon of books that's no longer canon, of an outside species that's been spying on, the Star Wars galaxy. And, they don't use the Force. The Force doesn't really work on them. And they use, like, sort of a biomechanical self-occurring weaponry. They detest the technology that's used in the Star Wars galaxy, and there's like a big invasion. So there might be a story where the Krisk characters come in. Maybe Thrawn is trying to keep them out of the galaxy or figure out ways to negotiate with them. I mean, it's something that they could introduce into the show. So moving on, we're going to just hit some of the points in Rebels and in the Clone Wars of different things that happen with the Force. The Force has a lot of variety. It guides us and surrounds us and all that. And it holds this galaxy together. It's the main thing about Star Wars. It's the magic system. It's the wizard stuff. And it's, really a lot of times I think what people are looking for, even in The Mandalorian, people were excited for the show, but once we saw the little baby Yoda, Grogu, people were really excited for the show. And anytime we see the Force or mention of the Force, kind of how the Darksaber moves in the recent episode of Boba Fett, how it kind of resists the user. Lightsabers are Force items. Kyber crystals are grown in caves and things and harness the Force, essentially. We're just going to look at a couple of the interesting things about the Force that we've seen in the past. First, we have Bendu. Bendu is like a big, sentient Force character who kind of sits in between the light and the dark sides of the Force. One of those wisdom Yoda-type characters who, in Star Wars Rebels, the Jedi Kanan, who is training Ezra, is blinded in a fight with Darth Maul, and he goes to Bendu and receives advice, Force lore, the good stuff, the secrets and stuff that you need to know when you're becoming a Jedi or on your Jedi journey. He was a very dangerous character, turned into a storm cloud and fought against Admiral Thrawn's forces, and then disappeared, into a puff of smoke, just disappeared. So it's possible that we could see this character again. I don't know where, because his chitinous armor kind of lends itself best to the planet that he was on, but they might go back to that planet. It's possible that we could see this character or a character like him in the new shows. Next, one of the stranger ideas surrounding the Force and the Jedi is this kind of portal between worlds. It's it's a portal created by the Force that kind of connects space and time. If you didn't know, Ahsoka in the show Rebels fought Darth Vader and was mortally wounded and died. At least I think she went down into a cave, and that was the last we saw of her. But in a later season, Ezra opens this portal. He goes through. He hears the voices of people in the past. You hear voices from Qui-Gon Jinn and from Yoda and all these voices in the past that you'll recognize. He hears voices from people in the present. He hears voices from people in the future. People from Rogue One, people from the Star Wars sequel movies, and, he hears, everybody just in this little space because it connects time and space. And so he goes back, he starts looking for Obi-Wan, he starts looking for Yoda, but he finds Ahsoka. And in her fight with Darth Vader, he pulls her out of the past and brings her into his present. So the Ahsoka that we see later in the show and in The Mandalorian and Boba Fett is an Ahsoka essentially pulled out of the past who's living in the present. But this is an interesting place. Will we see this exact place in the future of Star Wars? I'm not too sure. They could definitely make mention of it. Ahsoka knows that it exists, so there's potential to have her use a knowledge of this place in her adventures. The Emperor also knew about this place and attacked Ezra and Ahsoka while they were there. Next we have Loth Wolves. So Ezra's home planet is Lothal. There's a lot of different species of creatures like the Loth cat, which sort of is like his spirit guide. You know, we see Ahsoka has the owl that you see with her. Ezra's is the Loth cat. And towards the end of the show, though, they introduce the Loth wolves, which are like mythological creatures on Lothal. And these are force-sensitive creatures. They seem to be able to move almost at hyperspeed from one side of the planet to the other or across vast distances. And they could take people with them as well. They were a very interesting addition to the Star Wars force-wielding creatures. And they are more or less sentient, which is really cool. And I think Dave Filoni, it would behoove him to kind of bring these force-sensitive animals and creatures, maybe not exactly like the Loth wolf, but more of that into the live action stuff. And finally, we have here depicted on this, in the show, I think it's like an outcrop of rocks, but it's a mural of the ones. There's the father and the son and the sister, and they are representations of the light and the dark sides of the Force. There's a whole mythology about these characters that goes back into Star Wars lore like millions of years, but these characters were seen in the Clone Wars. Obi-Wan and Anakin interacted with them. I think actually killed them. I think they killed each other, but Anakin and Obi-Wan kind of helped that process along its way. But they're commemorized here in this artwork. This is from Star Wars Rebels. It's a piece of artwork that can be manipulated with the Force. It's what Ezra uses, and it guides him to the portal. The one in between worlds is, uses the Force, and the hands of the artwork moves to direct him where he needs to go and to open up the portal. This was a weird one for me. I remember watching the Clone Wars and thinking, this is a bizarre episode because, the Force was always kind of an ether type thing, but they manifested it into physical people in the son and the daughter of the dark and the light, and they're always at odds. And so I thought it was a strange episode that was going to sort of be left in the Clone Wars, kind of just tucked away in one of the seasons and not made mention of again. But it is made mention of. The Night Sisters worship the sun. I think they worship both of these as deities or spirits. And then we see it again in Rebels to guide Ezra forward. And I think that's interesting of Filoni to keep these ancient characters in the mythology of the show and the Star Wars canon in general. I think it makes it interesting to have a more expansive lore. So those are some of the things and some of the concepts and characters that I think are going to be interesting moving forward into the new shows, whether they be cartoon, whether they be live action. I think it's going to be really fun to look for the things that we've seen. And if you haven't seen the shows, do yourself a favor, go watch them, go watch highlights. If you're not wanting to commit to watching all of the animated stuff, but go ahead and, just look up some highlight clips, look up some of the interesting stuff. There's some really great scenes in both the Clone Wars to establish Ahsoka canon and Rebels to establish more Ahsoka canon, but also some of the really cool interactions with Darth Vader, with the Jedi, with Bendu. There's a lot of really cool stuff in both shows. And check out The Bad Batch. It's a good show. It's really fun. For those of you who know the lore and know the shows, definitely leave a comment. Tell me, some of the characters that you guys think are going to be interesting. Tell me some of the stuff maybe from the books or any of the comic series. I mean, we've already seen like Chrysanthemum is from one of the comic series and brought into the live action. Tell me about some of the stuff that you guys would be interested to see in the show. If you guys like this video, check out some of the other stuff that we've done in the past. If you want to see the whole episode, go check out the Wacky Wonderful Show on the podcast channel. Yeah, you can watch the whole show. We have a beginning and an end segment, and you can watch my and Joe's segment in the whole thing. Watch it, you can listen to it. And if you guys like the content, leave a like, leave a subscribe. We thank you guys for coming to see us today. Have a good one. Woo! Oh boy.
What an episode.
What an episode. A lot of stuff.
So much.
So much stuff.
So much I've learned. How the crap, there's a middleman between the dark side and the light side, a big giant creature who turns into clouds.
Well, he's not really like a middleman, but he's like, he walks the line. Kind of like Ahsoka.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea has been floated in
I didn't know
Star
that
Wars.
Ahsoka walks the line.
Yeah, she's essentially what's called a gray Jedi.
Ah.
So the idea of the gray Jedi has kind of been floating through the Star Wars fandom for years.
Which is kind of the cooler Jedi.
Yeah, like a Jedi who doesn't ascribe to the dark or the light and just kind of walks the path like a Ronin.
Like social
You know, a
justice.
samurai without a master.
A libertarian in the forest.
In the forest? I thought you were going to say a libertarian in the force.
no, maybe.
I was like, all right, that's pretty cool.
That works cool. Libertarian. Look,
Yeah.
walks the middle ground. It's like, I'm neutral, and there are, pros and cons to both. The world is gray. The galaxy's gray.
Well, it would not really a pros and cons to both as much as I kind of follow my own code, and it doesn't need to ascribe to either side.
Kind of like
Or subscribe
I
to
did
either
it
side.
my way, but
Yeah,
for
yeah.
Ahsoka.
Yeah, Ahsoka's the Frank Sinatra of the Star Wars
Yeah.
universe.
And if there's going to be any Frank Sinatras, then make it Ahsoka Sinatra.
But I mean, I'm really intrigued by. I really loved the Bendu character. Just this big, massive force being, kind of like Yoda,
Kind of like
almost like a force dyad. Like he's made up of force energy, essentially. And
keeps him going.
just a very scary, kind of powerful character. I really loved seeing him on screen every time he was on screen, and then when he turns into like a storm cloud and attacks the enemy.
Yeah.
Even though he said he wasn't going to intervene or anything.
He just
that was
does
cool.
anyway.
But I also love like the Loth Wolves. They were super cool.
So you like force-sensitive, force-driven beings.
Yeah. I think
That's your thing.
I think that the Star Wars universe could use a few more of these mysterious force manipulating creatures, whether they be like the Loth Wolves, who seem to be more or less sentient, or if they're like a non-sentient species. Maybe I know that I've looked it up. The Mythosaur isn't a force wielding creature, but maybe it could be.
Could be.
Maybe they could they could throw that in when Mando definitely goes to Mandalore and fights one. It's definitely gonna happen, 100%.
It might be happening. It might have already happened by the time that people are watching this.
I mean, at the very least, we're gonna see like a skeleton. I mean, it's on all of like their armor, and it's their symbol.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of stuff.
There's too much stuff. And if I'm going to say what I linger towards, it's going to be, the wanderers of the galaxy. It's going to be kind of the Ahsokas.
You like the Ahsokas, and
but I like the
Cad Banes.
I like the aftermath Kenobi. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
I like the Cad Banes. I like the Boba Fetts. I like the Mandalorians. I like the aftermath Yoda more than I like the Council Yoda. You know what I'm saying?
Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering.
I didn't like that. He was so lazy. He just crossed his legs, floated around buildings, talked to little kids, and hung out in rooms with blind lights going across his face. You know what I'm saying?
Teaching little younglings.
How wonderful is the mind of a child.
Yeah, I like the Wanderers of the Galaxy, man.
Yeah.
And I don't... Here's the thing. I always had a secret Star Wars character in my head, and I'm like, the galaxy's a big place. This could exist.
Yeah. I do too. Absolutely. I've drawn mine.
Well, I have 2.
Yeah. We'll show these to each other later.
Well, I
Like
don't
when
have
the
my
audience
drawing
isn't
anymore.
watching. Oh, really?
Oh, you have yours ready to go.
It's on my phone. I've showed it to you before.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I remember.
Yeah, the galaxy's a big place, and
Wacky creatures.
there's a lot of creatures. And something I didn't mention in my video is the ships. It's Star Wars. It's all about the ships. I loved the Mando's ship, like his old ship. Loved it to death. It was one of my favorite ships. But the ships that we see, the clones in, the ships that we see Luke and, Han in, the Millennium Falcon, there's stuff in the cartoons that can be put into the live action. They've already done it with Harrison Dula's ship and another ship from, I think it was from Rebels. It was like you remember that scene in Rogue One where there's a ship that pushes one Star Destroyer into another? I think that was from Rebels.
Oh, okay.
I think that ship was in Rebels.
Sick.
But I can't be 100% sure. But I mean, we're seeing like the Naboo Starfighter
It's so awesome.
reimagined
It's like
for the Mando.
It's like a Corvette for
Yeah.
space.
And we could totally see the ship that Anakin and Obi-Wan and Ahsoka they have like a ship for the 3 of them that they fly around in the early episodes of the Clone Wars.
Okay.
We could totally see that ship.
Well, of course.
Maybe Ahsoka drives that one around.
That'd be cool.
Wouldn't that be cool?
That'd be pretty sick.
Yeah.
The ships are a big part of the universe.
Yeah.
And it's the form of transportation. You can't do anything except walk around Tatooine if you don't have a ship. And I mean, even the moody teenagers have their go-go bikes.
Don't even. The Mos Vespa gang.
The Mos Vespa gang.
We got
ships right
we got
outside.
TIE fighters going by. Yeah.
It's Anakin. It's one of them races, the pod racers.
But in addition to like the story stuff, we were saying before the podcast, there's all the filmmaking stuff and the stuff they're doing right now with what is that called?
The LED wall.
With the LED wall, that stuff's insane.
It's a LED wall combined with filmmaking techniques combined with video game technology brought together, not created by, but first used by my favorite DP, Greg Fraser. Yeah. He started it.
I was looking, I don't even know how I found this, but I was looking at like gaming stuff and, they were showing the worlds and the things that, people can generate now that they're experimenting with.
Absolutely.
And they mentioned the one system that they've been using for Boba Fett and the Mandalorian. And the beauty of that system is the natural light. The light that is reflecting off of his armor, the light that's reflecting in their eyes, the light that's casting on the matte colors of their clothes and things. That's the light that it's supposed to be.
Absolutely.
And it all looks so good.
It's being affected by a actual artificial, but really there in camera environment. And it's revolutionary. I've heard an interview with Greg Fraser who said, we're scratching the surface on something big that's going to be the next generation of filmmaking, and we can't even really comprehend yet what it's going to look like. But this technology they're using on these new Star Wars series is literally just the beginning.
I mean, you could imagine, just for example, if they were to set up like a cockpit on a gyroscope or something and put somebody in it and inside a dome of like the LED stuff. And then you just have like stars and planets going by on the walls and in the dome and all the light reflecting on the ship and everything.
Yeah, it's perfect.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
But the thing is, so basically all that to say, if you want to get into the future of employment, get into filmmaking, because it's just going to keep going up. Up until we hit a wall or economic crash, and then no one has a job.
Yeah.
Filmmaking has a long ways to go. Still.
But I was really liking what you were saying about the colors in that scene.
The contrasting.
How I think what made that scene so palpable is the way Cad Bane looks. He's dark yet very clear. You see his face, you see his eyes, you see his hat, and the back is very bright.
It's washed out.
But he's so crisp. Cobb Vanth as well. Very crisp. But Bane
was front and center in that scene.
Front and center. He's the,
The cool thing about it, the environment was perfect to put him in that environment to introduce him. It's literally perfect because you could introduce him in the shadows and make him more of a mysterious character. But this was like, everybody who's a super fan knows this character. Front and center, put him out in the desert, expose him, put him up against a white background so we see him as a dark, menacing character that breaks that desert soft glow feel with this harsh, gritty, dangerous persona.
Yeah.
And then now we have Cad Bane.
But it's like, Filoni knows how to make his characters look cool.
Yeah.
I mean, when he introduced Cad Bane, dynamic lighting, dynamic camera stuff, everything looked perfect.
Well, even the lighting was simple, to be honest.
But like when he introduced Ahsoka in the fog, her lightsabers lighting up, they were using actual physical things that glowed that were in the shape of her lightsabers to get the light on her face and the fog behind her. He knows how to make his characters look epic.
Yes.
He directed both of those episodes and they look just beautiful.
And let's just quickly acknowledge kudos to getting Luke Skywalker looking so much better.
Oh man,
so much better.
Yeah.
Than he did in the first
the way his mouth moved. There were some parts.
You're this freaking close.
There were some parts where I was like, but a lot of it felt really natural.
Yeah.
And you could actually feel like this is a character. This is a real character. Unlike when you're watching The Mandalorian, he looks so stiff. And you're familiar with the Uncanny Valley, which it's our mind's ability to recognize a human face. And with all that like AI face mapping stuff, things we've seen with Leia and Admiral Tarkin, we know when it's not real.
But you're getting
our brains know, but they're getting so close.
They're getting so close. Well, the thing is, without paying attention, if you didn't know that's not Mark Hamill, and you didn't know Luke Skywalker, and you thought the old Star Wars were made last year, and this is like the next, if you just didn't know,
be like, wow,
you could be convinced.
You could be like, I think they put a little bit of too much makeup on him in that scene. Yeah.
But
otherwise.
I really like Baby Yoda, and they're like, what are you talking about, man? That was a deep fake. It's like, what? Mark Hamill does not look like that.
No. But there's so much stuff. Yeah. And it's a good thing we've planned to do a bunch of episodes, because otherwise we're going to do what we're doing, and that's sit and just talk about Star Wars for the entire episode.
Yeah.
But we're going to have to move on to the next episodes. So, we thank you guys for watching. Thanks for sticking around throughout the whole episode. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Anything you want to say to the people?
If you want to get these or the Wiseworks podcast a week early and see some of our exclusive content, check out Patreon, our Patreon. You can either search Wiseworks or you can look at the link in the description and find us there. If you support people on Patreon, hey, I'm just going to say this. We're not big now, but 10 years, 20 years down the road, we're probably going to be the biggest on Patreon. So
we could be.
Well, we definitely are going to be. We're going to be. If we keep on this track for 20 years, we'll be the biggest on Patreon.
We'll be the biggest on Patreon.
So
help make us the biggest on Patreon.
No, well, yeah, we're going to be, but, get in early.
Get on this train early.
Get in early, and you won't be disappointed, because we love you. We hope that in return you love us back.
Thank you guys for watching.
We love Star Wars. Bye.